Hello, hello, and thank you so much for joining us for the Tim and Jim Show. I am Tim Sohn here in the woods with the bears and the turkeys, and I'm delighted to be here with my trusty co-host and friend, Jim Fuse. Take it away.
Good afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are, because this is an international show. And thank you for joining us. And we're excited to have our good friend, Kendra, who she was my boss and Tim's boss at Social Media Marketing World. And she did a great
She really
job
cracked the whip.
keeping us in line. Kendra is the owner of Mota Marketing. And so, Kendra, tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. I am, as you mentioned, I have the agency Mota Marketing, which specializes in cannabis and CBD marketing for those companies. And then I also have a separate side of my business that's field marketing, and that is more traditional businesses. I have been in marketing for more than 20 years and absolutely love all the changes and love everything we can do. And I'm excited to talk about it with you guys.
And we're excited for you to talk with us about it. And we want to thank everyone who's tuning in. We really appreciate everyone joining us for all the valuable information Kendra is going to share with us today. So please let us know down in the comments if you guys have any questions for Kendra. And we're also excited to announce that starting with this episode, StreamYard, the amazing platform we use to produce our shows, we are excited that they are now a sponsor of the Tim and Jim Show. Right, Jim?
Absolutely. It's a thrill. We've been working with them since February of last year. Wow, it's been over a year. And
Crazy.
Not to mention next month, August, we're going to be coming up on episode 100. And also want to thank everybody for their support. We now have our YouTube channel is actually branded the Tim and Jim Show. We got over that 100 subscriber mark. So thank you for subscribing as well. So yeah, just a lot of great things happening. Excited to close out the month of June. Can you believe that? We're closing out June.
Crazy.
But let's get to talking about Kendra.
Let's talk about me.
Yes. So today, guys, we're going to talk about how limitations can spark creativity. So, Jim, here, do you want to take the first question for Kendra?
Sure. Kendra, where do limitations, or as Tim likes to sometimes say, regulations, come from?
Absolutely. There's different types of limitations that can impact your marketing, right? So it can be rules and regulations within a company or an organization, within a community, a city, county, industry, as well as even, federal and global regulations around something. So there's a lot of different types of regulations and limitations. And besides just the levels of them, there's also different types, right? Limitations in terms of resources. I have a ton of things I want to do, but I don't have the ability to do them. Or there's the limitation of budget. So I used to run all the marketing for a large university in California, and we had a tiny little budget compared to, the University of Phoenix's billion-dollar marketing budget. So how can you compete when you're basically a rounding error of a larger amount? So there's different, and there's also time, right? So if you have a project and it's due, tomorrow, how much can you get done in that time and make the biggest impact? So it's looking at all of the different types of limitations and regulations that can actually cause your marketing and your ideas to become small. And how can you look at those in different ways to use them to your advantage? Like, be smart and scrappy.
Yes. So speaking of that was a great lead into our second question, Kendra. So how can we use limitations to our advantage anyway?
Absolutely. There's a few different ways that you can do that. And one is part of it's mindset and looking at them as a challenge and not something that you're fighting against. Some people really like that, like competitive fighting against kind of approach. But I think that if you look at them as something you can overcome by being smarter than the limitations in the box that you're in, that it can really help create those opportunities for creativity. There's a lot of different ways you can go about the mindset and then going about kind of trying to push against those limitations. And that's what I wanted to talk about as well.
Yes, definitely. So Kendra, are there maybe like any examples you could give us in terms of limitations and how to get past them? Like any that, you've dealt with, or maybe you've dealt with a client without mentioning their name, of course.
Right. Yeah, I think that, I mentioned the budget limitation earlier. We had, like I said, our budget was a rounding error. Wasn't even that, honestly, compared to the $1 billion marketing budget. And so trying to figure out how to grow the number of students, or trying to figure out how to stand out as a solopreneur, if you're trying to do all of these things, you have to get crafty and you have to get scrappy and figure out how to manage things in a smarter way. So what I ended up doing at the university was creating a aspirational campaign that was called "What's Your Goal?" And then we ended up using a lot of consumer or student driven content. So we used, user-generated content, and we were able to help it and use storytelling to be able to bypass the limitations of the budget, because people were so excited to see their content, they were sharing it up. So that automatically increased our reach and awareness, and ultimately the number of students that we had.
That's awesome. And I love that idea of user-generated content. I know I'm working with a client right now that we created a contest. It's actually like during all this coronavirus stuff, a bunch of artists came together and they decorated like these life-size statues of deer. So this organization that's like a chamber of commerce, they are holding a deer auction. And so they're having this contest of people taking pictures with the deer. Mm-hmm. So it's like that idea of user-generated content.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what ended up happening with that particular campaign, and keep in mind, this campaign was 10 years ago, so that was a new idea, a new-ish idea, but we were able to get there by asking questions. And what I ended up doing is just having random conversations with people all throughout the organization, and who were basically my clients, right? The people who were helping the students enroll, and the people on the tech side and the customer service side. And I gathered all those questions together and then sat down with my team and we brainstormed out what could we do. And a lot of that came into storytelling and being able to share their stories, not our stories. And I think that's an important difference as well, is, people care who you are, but they care more about what you're able to do for somebody else and what the impact is on them.
Well, and I think another thing too, and you both have kind of touched on it without saying it, but one of the things that limitations makes us realize that how important collaboration could be, right? Because if we have something that we're not good at, instead of, fighting ourselves, work together. I mean, Tim and I collaborated on this show, and we've seen how not only has the show progressed and become better because we work together, but it's helped both of us become better. Where I think we would both say that if we didn't have the support of each other, we wouldn't be sitting here today doing live streaming. I mean, would you agree, Tim?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I love doing a show where there's somebody else I'm working with. We all bring our own perspectives and our own networks and our own talents. So I love that diversity of all those things that it brings to the table as well.
It's true. It's, I took Seth Godin's Alt MBA program a couple of years ago, which was interesting. I'm a total education junkie. I teach at universities, I teach social media, but I also cannot ever stop learning. And one of the things we had, they sent us a giant box of books. There was like 10, 12 books in this box that we were supposed to read in the month prior to the course starting. And one of them was called A Beautiful Constraint. And at first I was like, and I wasn't really sure about it, but what it ended up doing is actually helping me look at this in a different way. So when you run up against challenges, one of the things that they have is a whole like structure of asking can-if questions. So can we do this if this were to happen? And so everything's positive, and you can look at it at the different areas. Can we do this if we had more budget? Or if, what would it take to be able to do this? What would have to happen? So, partnerships, or, what is that getting sponsorships and more clients, and what are your goals? And then asking the questions around them. And it becomes an interesting structure for, just for thinking through what are some of the options. And, partnership and collaboration is a great one. It's absolutely, demonstrate right by you guys. It's really effective in terms of what you're trying to do.
And I think even this has definitely been a time that we all didn't expect because, we all were hanging out at the beginning of March, and
So long ago.
it's so long ago. But when you consider that, how much I think, and I love that, can we do this if this? You've really had to think about that even more because of the challenges of the environment, literally, not just figuratively. So how can we do these things if we're not able to meet in person? And that's where, like Zoom has become its own verb, right? We're
Yeah.
Zooming today, but I'd much rather be StreamYarding today than Zooming.
You made a verb out of StreamYard. Instead of verb, StreamYarding.
Yes, that's right. We coined that here first, right?
That's right. What about you, Jim, in terms of limitations? Have you faced certain limitations in terms of your business or any clients, like any examples you could share?
Well, I think sometimes the limitation for some people is technology. They have a resistance to change. They we're used to doing things a certain way, and I think especially because I'm a year short of 55. I think even more so, a lot of established business owners, right? We grew up without cell phones and other things, and so what do you mean you want me to go live on this darn contraption? And getting people to overcome their fear of technology is definitely a challenge, but but at the same time you also need to keep people focused, because I think the problem with technology as well, and I can be guilty of this, is it's kind of like that whole shiny object syndrome. Like, you hear everybody's like, oh, you got to get on TikTok, and I'm like, well, that might be great for some people, but is it really going to drive sales? Why don't I focus on those platforms where the people I, want to work with are, as opposed to like, oh, I got to get here, I got to get there. And so I think that becomes a challenge as well, is how do you keep people focused? I mean, even with Facebook right now, because of all the things that are going on, there's a lot of negativity going on. And so that could be affecting your business from the perspective of you're not getting as many eyes on your stuff because people are like, I just don't want to be on there.
Right.
I'm purging Facebook. So then it's like, well, where do I go next? So I mean, I think those are some of the challenges, the limitations that we're running into, is where do I need to spend my time to make it effective, right? Is what I think.
And I think that goes back to figuring out the priority and the goal, right? And so if the goal is to reach, if your ultimate goal is to reach more of your target audience, we can if we go live, if we go where they go. But I think that it's not just the brainstorming piece and getting all the ideas together, because I don't know about you guys, but the brainstorming piece I love. I can do that all day long and end up with more energy at the end of the day than I started with. But I think it's also running it through that filter of what are the goals, what are the priorities, and what's realistic, right? We can all go on TikTok, but is that really where your audience is? And then part of it's mindset. What are the limitations that we're putting in front of ourselves, right? So if one of the things that in reaching our audience is we need to be streaming and doing the things to get in front of them, and the limitations are technology, what do we need to do to overcome that? What do we need to learn? And that's actually, I interviewed somebody on my live show yesterday, and that was what we were talking about, is she was a trained doctor, and now she's doing videos and live streaming with her phone and a tripod. That's all she uses, and that's all it takes.
Exactly. And it's interesting too, because I did a poll, I think it's almost done running on LinkedIn, where I was asking people like, what's one of these 4 areas that's keeping you from going live? And a lot of it is confidence on camera. And so you bring up a great point, right? Just sit in front of your phone and practice, right? Just go live, and that's actually really going live. Just hit the record button until you're comfortable, because I think the biggest challenge, right? Remember cassette tapes, Kendra? I don't know if Tim does.
I remember. Absolutely.
I remember I could not stand the sound of my own voice on a cassette tape.
Yep.
And it's probably still true to a point, but I think you start to get used to it over time. And I think that's another thing, because we're so critical on ourselves, right? It comes back to imposter syndrome, where you may not like the sound of your voice, but other people do, but we're just so critical on ourselves.
Absolutely. I think that when it comes to camera confidence, for me, it was absolutely practice, just turning on and talking, and then I started outlining the ideas I had. I do a lot of teaching, so I'm used to going live with a class, and I'm used to having a lecture, right? So I've got my lecture and I've got the security of the slides. So when it's just me, it's a little bit more challenging, but it takes practice and time. And, the first time I went live in a group with 25 people watching, I was sitting on my couch with as my backdrop, and my dog walked up behind me on the couch, fell through the cushions, and then you could see his paws right over my shoulder, his paws pulling himself out, standing up, shaking himself off and going on. I'm like, I've got failed puppy gymnastics happening behind me right now while I'm trying to talk about the importance of knowing who your customer is, and you just keep going.
Right.
Exactly. And we want to thank everyone who's tuning in, watching. Melissa is watching. She says, with new options for social, it is hard to be disciplined and stay on track with target market platforms.
It's true. One of the things that I always tell people when I'm teaching is that you don't have to be everywhere, and I think that the social overwhelm is real. And so sometimes I've seen people just be so thankful to get the permission of not needing to be everywhere and taking advantage of every single little thing. Know where your customers are and know what is going to help them. And if you want to test stuff, great, but stick with what's tried and true, and then push the boundaries a little bit throughout, because otherwise it's just so overwhelming.
That's right. You heard it here first, people. Kendra's giving you permission.
Exactly.
You don't have to be everywhere.
Yes. So, guys, we're going to take a brief break for our sponsor, StreamYard. This is the first time they're sponsoring our show, so we will be back in 15 seconds. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And we're back. We're back with Kendra and Jim, and we are talking about limitations and creativity. And thank you all for joining us. Let us know if you have any questions for Kendra down below. And we want to say thank you again to StreamYard for providing this amazing platform for all of us to use. So, Jim, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah. So, Kendra, how are video limitations, and how can we make that a creative combination that's really powerful?
I think that there's a ton of different ways that you can use video, and I think that with limitations and specifically regulations right now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the cannabis and CBD industry, just because it's the industry that I've worked with, looking at financial services and education and all these different industries where there's the most regulations on cannabis and CBD. And it's really hard to break through. What do you do if you can barely do any advertising? What do you do if the only things you can get across are things that don't mention the benefits of your product? It becomes a whole different way of needing to connect and get your brand to stand out. And that's where you can do interesting things with video, whether it's interviews, or there's a woman who owns, Kate Manson, who owns a company called Tarot CBD, and she plays into the tarot theme and does tarot card readings every Wednesday night live on Instagram. And there's really interesting things you can do if you start thinking about, once again, what can we do if we want to go live? What do we do if we want to use video to connect and start telling those stories and behind the scenes? And it gives you another avenue for more reach than you would normally have if you were just posting, right? And it gives you a chance for more creativity and for customers to see who you really are.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. What do you think, Jim?
Well, I think video has become a huge challenge for people, because even as an example, and because I like to call myself, I don't have my mad scientist hat out. I'm a mad scientist of social media, and the aspect is things are always changing. And so
It really is.
when we look at things like Zoom, right? it can become very boring watching the same old presentation of I'm going to just share a slide to my screen and I'm going to talk, but you can't see me, because we want the interaction like we're
Yeah.
having here. So like I'm now, Brian Fanzo and a couple other people I know are big fans of Prezi, because Prezi can allow me to use Zoom even, right? A virtual
Mhm.
camming it, share my presentation on part of the screen, but you can still see me. Or if
Mhm.
I want to go to the screen for a second and then come back to me, I'm not doing the share screen process that so many people mess up in, Zoom's like, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? And so I think, how can we make our video presentation more exciting, whether it's live, whether it's recorded? The beauty of recorded, and like even with StreamYard, right? Got to give a plug to StreamYard. You can do a
Yes.
record only
Mhm.
mode. So you could actually, and I did this for when I was on the social selling summit last week. I recorded my presentation using StreamYard by using the banners to emphasize the points as I was talking, as opposed to let me just throw up a PowerPoint and talk
Mhm.
to a slide, because I want to connect with the audience.
Yep.
And as opposed to, I don't, because Kendra and I both, right, as instructors, I've done the class thing, and I don't like to. It's like I might throw a slide up there, but I'm going to talk to it. I'm not going to read it, right? Because
Yep.
people can read on their own. And I think it starts to become boring if all you're doing is talking to your slides.
Yep.
And then the danger in social media, or in a lot of things, because there's so much change, you don't want to just share screens of this is what Facebook, looks like today, because tomorrow it's like, well, you told me I needed to do this. Well, it's not
Mhm.
there anymore. So I think those are some of the things with video you have to take into consideration. Maybe you want to talk more strategically to get them to do that one-on-one or group coaching session where you're getting into the meat. And then if you look at a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of these highly successful YouTube videos are 5 to 10 minutes in length. It's just enough. It's to the point. It's the information the person is looking for, because not everybody has time to watch this long, drawn out video.
It's the anti-food blogger format, right? Where it's like 45 pages of story, and then at the end is like the recipe.
Right.
No one wants a 45-minute video with all the points at the very end.
Right. Bottom
Don't
line
do
up
that.
front, right? There's another one.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's always interesting to see. I know that when I teach social media, I try and break it down where 75% is strategy and the other 25% are the tactics and the hands-on piece. And only because part of it's for my own sanity, right? Every time I have to go through and update the course or update the material, I'm thinking, why didn't I do a history class or astronomy or something that doesn't change ever? Like Pluto, planet, not a planet, planet. Like that's the only change you have to make. Not 45 changes on Facebook up until the minute you go in live to teach it. But I also think that once again, these changes and these changes actually force us to be more creative and to learn and to figure out how to use these new tools and pieces and things that we can do to our advantage, when you can take the time to learn them all, or
Right.
pick the ones you want to learn that are going to be relevant to your audience.
And I think Tim and I see this a lot too. I did a video earlier today. StreamYard now lets you host from your mobile device. So I went out on my patio using a tripod and used my iPhone to go live on StreamYard. So what were some of the benefits? I could share banners, I could share comments that you can't necessarily do, like say natively on Facebook. Not to mention I was multi-streaming. And so, uh, but you got to think, but some people are like, oh, I only want to go live on my phone. Okay. But is that because you just don't feel comfortable in setting up a studio environment like the three of us are in? So, I mean, I think we have to not be resistant to change, because when we do that, we are creating a limitation, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
I think these are the things we need to consider, because if we're not willing to change, and I love what you said earlier, Kendra, because I'm a huge fan as well, right? Learning is continuous. I think
Mhm.
I don't know if it's Tony Robbins that said it or somebody said it. It's like once we stop learning, we start to die.
Yep.
Um, and I think education is and self-learning, self-evaluation is what keeps us driven, keeps us young, keeps us alive. And there's just so much change that's constantly happening. I mean, a year from now, Zoom could theoretically be a thing of the past, right?
Yep.
There's been other live platforms that have come and gone. And I really feel like what has occurred in, with everything that's happened, one, we have a shift to more people are going to work remotely, period. They're never going to go back to their office spaces. They're looking for tools that allow this interactivity. And so I think there'll be a company that will finally say, hey, this thing that we wanted to do is now ready to go to market. Because I think that part of the challenge is, StreamYard does a lot of what people want, but not everything. Zoom does things that people want, but not everything. So the person that can merge those two worlds is going to hit a home run.
One of the things that I've loved to see during the last few months has been all the creativity, right? And that's where, the limitation is you can't go outside. You can't do the things you normally do. So you have, farms in Northern California offering llamas and goats to join your Zoom call. You have restaurants that are selling, turning into markets to sell their own food. You have these companies that are creating platforms, Facebook Messenger rooms, to compete with each other and provide different options. And so, I've loved to see, even watching the late night shows and Saturday Night Live, and how everyone transitioned to the new way of doing things right now, has been really impressive. So when you look at those limitations, like look at the creativity that's come out of this. And we're going to keep seeing it as more things start emerging.
Oh, definitely. And Melissa is chiming in again. She says, shoot, lesson learned. I blocked video during a presentation last night versus staying on screen to, quote, avoid distraction. Oops.
It works.
Yes. And Senor Paisada is hashtag StreamYard and some cool emojis. So thanks for supporting StreamYard, Senor Paisada. So Kendra, thank you so much for being on the show. Tell us about how people can find out more information about you, website, social media, whatever you got.
Absolutely. Everything is Mota Marketing. So it's either social media at Mota Marketing or it's motamarketing.com. The other thing is that I actually, when I was on Leap Into Live Summit, I put together a playbook for regulated industries and running up against limitations. And that is at motamarketing.com/playbook.
Ooh. And if you'd like, you can drop it in the links, Kendra.
Okay.
After the show.
Perfect. Great. I will.
Definitely. So this was a great conversation. Jim, do you have any parting words?
I'm just so excited to see our friend Kendra as close as we can be at the moment.
So nice to see you guys.
And so, of course, we see you on social all the time. We just don't always get to talk like we're talking now. So that's been awesome. Exciting week in StreamYard. They're doing all kinds of great things, more things to come. Definitely, you want to check them out if you're, serious about live streaming. And who's our guest next week, Tim?
That's a good question. Do you know?
I know, but I have to pull out. Well, we have a great guest next week. We'll have our whole
amazing.
It's a surprise.
Amazing. It's a surprise.
A surprise guest.
A surprise guest. So yeah. See, so even that's the beauty of live video. You get to see some fun stuff. So, but thank you, Kendra, for being here. Tim, great as always to be here with you. And
until the
make
end,
sure
anyway.
you follow us on YouTube because we're out there. We love YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook.
All the things.
All the things.
All the things. But not TikTok. We're not on TikTok.
TikTok. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Jim.
Bye.